A man can buy land, cattle, even respect if his pockets run deep enough. But there's one thing no amount of gold can guarantee: an heir to carry his name. Marcus Steele was wealthy, rugged, and convinced that women were nothing but trouble. To him, a wife meant complications. But a child, that was an investment worth protecting. When Elena Cross stepped off the train, her fifth rejection from mail-order advertisements weighing heavy on her shoulders, Marcus didn't see romance. He saw a solution. The advertisement had sat on Elena's kitchen table like a challenge from fate. Seeking a woman who desires a child and can provide good home influence. No romance required. Wealth and security guaranteed. Must be willing to live on ranch. Right to Marcus Steele, Pine Ridge, Montana territory. At 32, Elena had memorized the taste of rejection. 5 times she'd answered similar advertisements. The first suitor in Kansas had declared she lacked feminine softness. The second in Colorado said her hands were too rough. The third had laughed at her love of literature. But this advertisement was different. Stark, honest in its lack of romantic pretense. No romance required. The words felt like relief. Elena gazed at children playing in the schoolyard. Little Annie Fletcher was helping Tommy Barnes tie his shoe. The sight made Elena's chest tighten with longing. She wanted that desperately, a child to guide, to nurture, to love. By evening, she'd made her decision. Dear Mr. Steele, I am writing in response to your advertisement. I am 32 years old, unmarried, and have been teaching school for 8 years. I understand you seek an arrangement rather than conventional courtship. I desire children above all else and would dedicate myself wholly to providing a loving home environment. I do not require romantic affection, only mutual respect and the opportunity to be a mother. Respectfully, Miss Elena Cross. 2 weeks passed with no response. Then a telegram arrived. Arrangements acceptable. Train ticket awaits Pine Ridge Station. Arrive November 15th. M. Steele. Pine Ridge sprawled across the Montana prairie, like a town built by men who believed in straight lines and hard work. As Elena stepped down from the passenger car, a tall figure separated itself from the shadows. Marcus Steele was younger than expected, perhaps 35, with dark hair and sharp gray eyes that cataloged every detail of her appearance. Miss Cross. His voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. He collected her trunk without ceremony, loading it into a black carriage. The ranch is 12 miles out. We'll have time to discuss the particulars of our arrangement. They crested a hill, and Elena gasped. The Steele Ranch spread across the valley below like something from a storybook. The main house was massive, 2 stories of white painted wood with a wraparound porch and tall windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. It's magnificent, she breathed. It's profitable, he corrected. Beauty is incidental. Rose Murphy, the housekeeper, led Elena to a chamber larger than her entire house back in Iowa, complete with an array of dresses made in Denver. At precisely 7 o'clock, Elena descended the stairs wearing deep green wool that fit perfectly. Marcus waited in the dining room, changed to a formal black suit. After an excellent but silent meal, Marcus led her to his study, a monument to masculine authority with dark wood paneling and hunting trophies. I believe in clarity, he began, opening a leather-bound ledger. First, your primary obligation is to conceive and bear my child. A son is preferable, but I'll accept a daughter, right? Provided she's healthy and intelligent. Elena flinched at the clinical description but nodded. Second, during pregnancy, you'll follow Dr. Harrison's instructions precisely. Third, you're forbidden from involving yourself in ranch business. Your sphere is the house and eventually the nursery. This stung. I'm quite capable with numbers, Mr. Steele. This ranch generates income that exceeds most small towns' budgets. I don't need assistance from someone whose experience extends to ordering chalk and primers. Fourth, you'll receive $50 monthly for personal expenses. Fifth, no correspondence with former suitors without my approval. Sixth, social obligations will be limited to church attendance and town functions where your presence as my companion is expected. Companion. Not wife, not partner. Companion. Seventh, the intimate aspect of our arrangement will commence immediately and continue until pregnancy is confirmed. What about affection? Not romantic love. I understand that's not part of this. But kindness, respect, basic human consideration? He studied her for a long moment. I'm not cruel, Miss Cross. I won't abuse you physically or emotionally, but I also won't pretend feelings I don't possess. Then I agree to your terms. Dr. Harrison examined her the next morning and pronounced her excellently suited for childbearing. The days that followed established a routine as precise as clockwork. Breakfast at 7, Marcus reading correspondence while eating. Mornings were hers to explore the house, the library with hundreds of books, the music room with its grand piano, the conservatory filled with exotic plants. Evenings brought their intimate encounters, clinical, respectful, but devoid of passion. 3 weeks into this routine, Elena found herself unable to sleep. She made her way to the kitchen for warm milk, her bare feet silent on cold floors. Moonlight streamed through tall windows. She wasn't alone. Marcus stood by the window, still dressed but disheveled, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "I was getting whiskey," he said without turning. "Sometimes it helps." "Does it work?" "Not often." His gaze moved over her face, lingering on her mouth. "What were you seeking?" "Warm milk. My mother always said it helped with restless thoughts." "And do you have restless thoughts, Miss Cross?" The way he said her name, softer than usual, sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Sometimes." About what? She should have said something safe. Instead, looking at him in the moonlight, she found herself being honest. "About you." His eyes darkened. "What about me?" "I wonder what you were like before." "Before you decided women were complications to be avoided." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that carefully maintained control. "You shouldn't wonder about such things." "Shouldn't I? We're sharing the most intimate of human experiences, yet I know nothing about you except that you want an heir and distrust emotions." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then you want to know?" "What do you want to know?" "Were you married before?" "Yes." "What happened to her?" His jaw tightened. "She left." 2 words that held a world of pain. "Why?" "Because I wasn't enough. Because ranch life was too lonely, too harsh. Because I couldn't give her the romance and excitement she craved. So you decided never to risk that again." "I decided to be honest about what I could offer from the beginning." They stood in silence, winter wind rattling the windows, while moonlight painted silver patterns between them. Elena found herself seeing past the controlled businessman to the wounded person beneath. "She was a fool," she said quietly. He looked startled. "What?" "Your wife. She was a fool to leave all this. To leave you." Something dangerous flickered in his gray eyes. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" She stepped closer. "I see a man who built something magnificent from nothing, who provides for dozens of families, who treats his workers fairly, who stocks his library with poetry despite claiming to have no romantic feelings." Elena. Her name on his lips was a warning. "A woman who could have all that and still find it lacking doesn't deserve what you offered her." He stared at her for a long moment, something intense and unguarded moving across his features. Then abruptly, his control reasserted itself. "You should return to your room, should I?" "Yes, before we both do something we'll regret." But he made no move to step away, and neither did she. The tension between them stretched taut, charged with possibilities neither had acknowledged before. "What if I don't want to go back to my room?" she whispered. His breathing changed. "Then you don't understand what you're risking." For a heartbeat, she thought he might explain. His gaze dropped to her mouth, his hands clenching into fists as though fighting the urge to reach for her. Then he stepped back. "Go to bed, Elena." But as she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Wait." She looked back to find him watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. Hungry, predatory, completely unguarded. "I want some sugar," he said, his voice low and rough with need. "So I'm having you tonight." The words should have shocked her. Instead, they sent liquid heat pooling in her belly. This wasn't the considerate, controlled man who'd been visiting her room with clinical precision. This was someone else entirely. "Here?" she breathed. "Here." He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face as his mouth came down on hers. This kiss was nothing like their careful, respectful exchanges. This was claiming, demanding, fierce with hunger that had been building behind his controlled facade. She melted into him as he backed her against the wall. "You want to know what I was like before?" he muttered against her throat. "This is what I was like. This is what she couldn't handle." His hands moved over her with barely leashed desperation. When he lifted her, she wrapped her legs around his waist instinctively. "Is this what you wanted to know?" he whispered roughly. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes." What followed was nothing like their previous encounters. This was raw, desperate, achingly intimate. He made love to her against that moonlit wall with a passion that stripped away every pretense, every carefully maintained boundary. Afterward, they stood breathing hard, her forehead pressed against his shoulder while his hands traced gentle patterns along her spine. "Elena," he said quietly, and there was something different in his voice, something vulnerable and uncertain. "Yes?" "This changes things." She lifted her head to meet his eyes, searching for regret in those gray depths. Instead, she found something that made her breath catch, an openness she'd never seen before. He took her to his room, a space she'd never entered, masculine and imposing with dark wood furniture. What happened in his bed was a revelation. Gone was any pretense of duty or obligation. This was pleasure given and received with an intensity that left them both shaken. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest while his fingers combed through her loosened hair. "Stay," he said quietly when she started to rise. "Here, all night." She settled back against him. "Marcus, what happened to make you so afraid of this?" His hands stilled in her hair. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly he began to speak. "Her name was Catherine. We married when I was 25. She was 19, beautiful, from a prominent Denver family. I thought I was the luckiest man alive." Elena remained silent, sensing this was a story he'd never told before. For the first year, everything seemed perfect, but gradually she began to change. The isolation got to her. She said the ranch was too quiet, too lonely, that I was too serious, too focused on work. His voice grew rougher. She wanted excitement, adventure, romance like the novels she constantly read. I tried to give her what she wanted, trips to Denver, parties, pretty things. But it was never enough. I was never enough. What happened? She started taking longer trips to visit her family. Finally, she just didn't come back. Left a letter saying she'd found someone who could give her the life she really wanted. Elena lifted her head to look at him, seeing the pain he'd carried for years. "I'm sorry." He shrugged, but the gesture was far from casual. "I learned my lesson. No more romantic notions, no more believing in love or happy endings." "And now?" His gray eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. "Now I'm wondering if I was wrong," he admitted quietly. "Because what I feel for you doesn't fit into any practical arrangement." The next morning brought changes impossible to ignore. Marcus appeared at breakfast freshly shaved, wearing a crisp white shirt that made his gray eyes seem almost silver. When Elena entered, he rose with fluid courtesy. "Good morning, Elena." The use of her first name made her cheeks warm. He moved to pull out her chair, his hands brushing her shoulders as she settled. "Good." He smiled, actually smiled, and the transformation was remarkable. "I was thinking, if you're amenable, we might ride out to the north pasture this morning. There's something I'd like to show you." In all her weeks at Pine Ridge Ranch, he'd never suggested she involve herself in ranch activities. An hour later, dressed in a split riding skirt Rose had procured, Elena found herself mounted on a gentle mare, while Marcus sat astride a magnificent black stallion. They rode across snow-covered pastures at an easy pace, Marcus pointing out landmarks and explaining ranch operations with enthusiasm she'd never heard from him before. "You really built all this from nothing?" Elena asked as they paused on a hill overlooking the ranch buildings spread below. "Started with borrowed money and more determination than sense," he admitted. "Everyone said I was crazy, 20 years old with no experience, trying to establish a cattle operation in territory that had broken stronger men." That evening, their dinner conversation was entirely different from previous weeks. Marcus asked about her life before Montana, listening with genuine interest as she described her students, her dreams of family. "What will you miss most about teaching?" he asked. She considered carefully. The moment when understanding dawns in a child's eyes, when something difficult suddenly becomes clear and they light up with the joy of learning. "It sounds like what a natural mother would value," he said softly. "Do you think I'll be a good mother?" "I think you'll be extraordinary." His gray eyes held hers. Any child would be lucky to have you guiding them. Later, when their lovemaking had a different quality, still passionate but threaded through with tenderness, he traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Elena," he said, his voice serious, "I need you to know something. Whatever happens between us, I won't leave you destitute if things don't work out. You'll always have security, always have a home here." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they created a cold knot in her stomach. "Are you expecting things not to work out?" "I'm trying to be practical, to protect you from my own uncertainties." She turned in his arms to face him fully. What uncertainties? He was quiet for so long, she wondered if he would answer. Finally, "I'm afraid I'll disappoint you the way I disappointed Catherine, that you'll realize I'm not capable of giving you what you need." "What do you think I need?" "Romance, poetry, pretty words, and grand gestures, all the things I don't know how to give." Elena studied his face in the lamplight, seeing genuine worry in his gray eyes. "Can I tell you a secret?" He nodded. "I don't need poetry or grand gestures. I need someone who will hold me when I'm frightened, who will listen when I talk about things that matter to me, who will touch me like I'm the most precious thing in his world." Her hand came up to cup his cheek. "I need someone who will build a life with me, not just give me pretty words." Something shifted in his expression. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. "And do you think I could be that someone?" "I think you already are." January brought a blizzard that lasted 4 days, trapping everyone on the ranch. Elena spent the time reading in the library, a cozy room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive stone fireplace that Marcus kept constantly fed with logs. After dinner on the 3rd day, they sat together by the fire in his study, her reading while he worked on ranch accounts. It was domestic, comfortable, the kind of evening she'd dreamed of sharing with a husband. "Elena?" he said suddenly, looking up from his ledgers. "Yes? Are you happy here?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I asked. Are you happy living at Pine Ridge with me?" She set down her book, studying his face. "Why do you ask?" "Because I need to know." He rose from his desk, moving to stand before the fire. "Before I say what I'm about to say, I need to know if you could be content with this life permanently." Her heart began racing. "Marcus, just answer the question, please." She took a shaky breath. "Yes, I'm happier here than I've ever been anywhere." He turned to face her, his gray eyes intense. "Even though I can't promise you romance or poetry or all the things other men might offer? Especially because of that." She rose to move closer. "I don't want pretty lies or empty gestures. I want something real, something built on truth rather than fantasy." "Then marry me." The words hung in the air between them, stark and uncompromising as everything else about him. "What?" she breathed. "Marry me. Legally, officially, permanently. Be my wife in every sense of the word." "But our arrangement, damn the arrangement." His voice was rough with emotion. "I don't want a business transaction anymore, Elena. I want a partner. I want someone who will stand beside me through good times and bad, who will help me build something lasting, who will be the mother of my children and the keeper of my heart." "Your heart?" He stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Yes, my heart, because somewhere in the past month, you've managed to claim it completely." Tears prickled behind her eyes. "Are you saying you love me?" "I'm saying I can't imagine my life without you. I'm saying that when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is seeing your face across the breakfast table. I'm saying that when I ride out to check cattle, I find myself hurrying back because I want to share what I've seen with you." His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I'm saying that if what I feel for you isn't love, then it's something so close it makes no difference." "Oh, Marcus." The words came out as barely a whisper. "Think about it," he said, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Don't give me an answer tonight." "I don't need to think about it." His eyes searched hers. "No, no." She reached up to cover his hands with hers. "Because I already know the answer." The next day, Elena found herself walking through the house and grounds, seeing everything with new eyes. She thought about the life she could build here. Children running through these halls, filling empty bedrooms with laughter and love. A partnership with a man who respected her intelligence and valued her opinions. She found him on the front porch as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink. "Beautiful evening," she said, joining him at the railing. "It is." But his eyes moved to her face, not the scenery. "I spent today imagining what my life could be like here. Really like, not just as part of an arrangement, but as your wife, your partner, the mother of your children." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And what did you conclude?" "That I've been a fool." Something flickered in his gray eyes, disappointment perhaps, or resignation. "I see." "No, you don't." She turned to face him fully, reaching for his hands. "I've been a fool because I've been so afraid of wanting too much, of hoping for things that seemed impossible for a woman like me, that I almost missed what was right in front of me." His breathing changed, becoming deeper, more careful. "Elena, I need you to understand something before I give you my answer." She stepped closer. "I'm not saying yes because of this house or your money or the security you can provide. I had all that already under our arrangement." "Then why?" "Because you're not the cold businessman you pretend to be. Because you built something magnificent from nothing and you're proud of it, as you should be. Because you care for your workers like family and treat your animals with respect. Because you were brave enough to risk everything for a dream when you were barely more than a boy." Her hands tightened on his. "Because when you look at me, I feel like I'm the only woman in the world. Because when you touch me, I understand what it means to be cherished. And?" His voice was barely a whisper. "And because I love you completely, irrevocably, forever. Not because you're wealthy or because you can provide for me, but because you're you, stubborn and passionate and generous and brave and absolutely perfect for me in every way that matters." The words hung in the evening air between them. Marcus went very still, his gray eyes searching her face as though afraid he'd misheard. "You love me," he repeated, as though testing the words. "I love you. Even though I'm not romantic or poetic or any of the things women usually want. I don't want romance or poetry. I want partnership. I want honesty. I want a man who will build a life with me based on truth, rather than pretty illusions." He reached for her then, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "Then yes, you'll marry me?" "Yes," she smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. "But I have conditions." His eyebrows rose in amusement. "Of course you do. What are they?" "I want a real wedding with a dress and flowers and the whole town invited. I want everyone to know you chose me. Not because you needed an heir, but because you wanted me as your wife." His thumb traced her lower lip. "What else?" "I want to help with the ranch accounts. You may not need my assistance, but I want to be your partner in everything, not just in name." "Granted. Anything else?" "I want you to stop pretending you don't have feelings. What we have isn't something to be ashamed of or hidden away. It's something to be celebrated." "Never again," he promised, and sealed the vow with a kiss that left no doubt about the depth of his feelings. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Anything else?" "Just this. I want you to know that when I walk into that church as your bride, I'll be the proudest, happiest woman in Montana Territory." His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "Good, because you're mine now, Elena, in every way that matters, and I'm never letting you go." The wedding had been everything Elena dreamed of and more. The entire population of Pine Ridge turned out to witness the ceremony. She'd walk down the aisle in a gown of ivory silk and French lace, her hand steady on Marcus's arm, her smile radiant with joy. Now, 6 months later, as she rode beside her husband across the rolling pastures of Pine Ridge Ranch, Elena marveled at how completely her life had transformed. Dr. Harrison's latest examination had confirmed what they'd both hoped. She was carrying Marcus's child, due to arrive with the first snows of winter. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, noting her contemplative expression as they paused to rest their horses beside a creek. "Everything," she said honestly. "A year ago, I was a lonely spinster, convinced no man would ever want me. Now I'm married to the most remarkable man in Montana Territory, expecting his child, living a life I never imagined possible." He reached over to take her hand, his wedding ring catching the afternoon light. "Any regrets?" "Only one." His eyebrows drew together with concern. What's that? That I didn't answer your advertisement sooner. That I wasted so much time being afraid of wanting too much. His laughter rang across the prairie, rich and warm and completely unguarded. The laugh of a man who had found everything he'd been searching for without knowing he was searching. Well then, Mrs. Steele, he said, lifting their joined hands to his lips and pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles, I suppose we'll just have to make up for lost time. As they rode toward home, their home, across land that stretched endlessly under the vast Montana sky, Elena smiled, thinking of the words that had started it all. I want some sugar, so I'm having you tonight. She'd given him far more than sugar. She'd given him her heart, her future, her complete and unconditional love. And in return, he'd given her everything she'd ever dreamed of. A partnership built on mutual respect, a passion that burned steady and true, and the promise of children who would carry their love forward into the future. Behind them, the setting sun painted the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson, while ahead lay Pine Ridge Ranch and all the tomorrows they would share as husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word, bound together by a love that had grown from the most practical of beginnings into something as vast and enduring as the land itself.